Some people want something for nothing. They want the effects of something without doing the work to earn it. Well, unlike most people, I don't necessarily have a problem with that. Stealing isn't necessarily wrong. It depends who's stealing and who's losing. Where I do have a problem is not with unearned goods, but unearned opinions. If you really want freedom, you should know yourself. You should understand where your beliefs come from. If you really examine the beliefs and assumptions you've picked up, you'll probably ditch most of them. I'm Chris, and this is what had to be said. This video was brought to you by the generous support of my Matreon matrons. Big thanks to all of them for making this channel possible. My goals on social media are partly to educate others on topics I study, which is obviously the point of this channel, but mostly to educate myself. I learn about stuff I don't know much about. I learn about new things I didn't know anything about. I learn about stuff I've been studying for years. Because whatever I know is incomplete and maybe completely wrong. The thing about opinions is they're not always based on knowledge. People are quick to form and defend opinions, and they don't always consider different points of view. We're offered glimpses into issues on the news or TED Talks or documentaries, so it feels like we have a decent understanding of the subject now, so we take on the opinions that we were guided toward by the information we were given, and then we think we came to those conclusions by ourselves. Like, if there was one thing I could teach on this channel, it would be to unlearn everything and not assume you know things until you know a lot about the subject. Often when I read a couple of books on something, I learn to think one way, but then I read maybe more people, more radical historians especially, or critics. I find 1,000 things that those other books left out that might make me think differently. If you know what the Dunning-Kruger effect is, keep it in mind. When opinions aren't based on knowledge of a subject, they're probably based on propaganda. On crucial topics like the state, the economy, culture, and history, people tend to think in whatever cliches they were taught as kids. The media reinforce the cliches at every turn, so everyone assumes they're correct. I mean, I could give examples for hours, but I debunk everything you've heard about, like, your vote counts and democratic representatives and stuff in this series, in case you're interested. I examine a lot of the words we use and assumptions we go by on this channel, so, watch all my videos. Confident people try to tell me that I don't know how the political and economic system works because I don't subscribe to the popular views about how it works. Because unlike most people, I've studied it and listened to people who know and listened to people who don't know, and I know something about how to question it. But if everybody seems to think one way, maybe because we learned it from school, not only do we think it must be right, but it's practically a moral imperative. If others don't believe it, well, we have to correct them, or impose our will on them, since we know better. How many kids get bullied into standing for civic pledges and songs? How many have been bullied because of this particular bullshit cartoon? You bully them first, wear them down, then you can indoctrinate them into your cult of nationalism. I would argue, if you haven't studied a topic, you should not have an opinion on it. You don't need opinions on everything. In fact, spreading around an uneducated opinion is really irresponsible. But we, especially men, I think, have this thing in this culture where we feel compelled to have an opinion on everything. And we have to use it to win arguments. We have to prove ourselves right in competition for the answer, even if it doesn't matter. But unless it's something you know really well, why open your mouth at all? Why not just listen? Why not admit when you don't know? The more you admit to yourself that you don't know, the easier it is to see the limits of your knowledge. And you can do things about it, like asking questions and reading and listening to people. Changing your mind is a good thing. It's a sign of humility and growth. Ask more questions. Questions are more important than answers. If you're satisfied with an answer, well, what if it's the wrong answer? See if there are more questions you can ask. And ask the right people, please. Don't ask the people who have all the answers on all the subjects they don't understand. Like, say, any right-wing pundit on any topic. All this is part of unlearning. The reason on this channel I stress unlearning so much is most of what we're taught is not true. Like that guy who's defending your rights by killing people overseas. So many of the most popular beliefs are handed down to us from powerful people who want us to think that way. They want to maintain this relationship where they have all the money and make all the decisions, while we remain divided against each other and have to do all the work. You can question every aspect of those beliefs, whether they're factually correct, which might be the most important part, but also who it benefits for you to think this way, and whether or not you could adopt a much less cruel, much more compassionate position. After all, if you don't at least question what you hear, why would you assume it's accurate? Because it fits with your preconceived notions? I mean, that's how we usually choose what to believe. Right-wingers know this, of course, so they'll saturate the news and the internet with stories that are essentially lies, but they lead people to think there are serious problems where there is no problem, like immigration or trans people existing. Or else to ignore and play down real problems, like the threat to black lives by the police and other right-wing militias. So we hear a bunch of stories about one thing and come to think, well, even if this individual story isn't true, it all adds up to something that we need to fix, violently if necessary. But it might just all be bullshit. Leave your bubble. What are other people saying about this issue? That brings us to listening. I'm big on the idea of listening to people so you know how wrong you are, or to improve your understanding of a subject, or just to sympathize with them. But listening without prejudice is a skill too, so it takes time to build up. When we say listen to women or listen to marginalized people, it's actually easy to screw that up. First, you probably already have lots of reasons not to listen to somebody, and automatically disbelieving and discounting them is the same as not listening. Like these clowns who can only think in cliches. You might have heard people in that group, whichever group, lie a lot and can't be trusted. You might have long since unconsciously associated those people with crime or violence or laziness or whatever bad thing you recognize more in groups you don't identify with. When you hear someone online speak, you already have reasons not to listen. And maybe after you hear them, you go online and hear someone give you even more reasons to discount them. See the way she's saying it, the way her eyes are, her tone of voice. That means she's lying. Or maybe someone said she's friends with some guy who paid her to say all this. So don't listen to her tell you her experiences. Just listen to me. We have another thing in the culture I think I belong to where we can't listen to the people affected. We have to listen to someone else tell us what it means. I don't know if it's just white, cis-het, able-bodied people, but they or we are a big problem nonetheless. We don't listen to native people or even know the history of the land we live on, so we just ignore them and say nothing about police violence against them. We don't listen to black people, so instead we get manipulated with statistics about crime, as if numbers on paper could accurately convey the experience of being black. We don't listen to Muslims because we've been told they're all potential terrorists who will kill you if you don't convert to Islam. So they get disproportionately targeted by police and the FBI, and we think that must mean law enforcement is keeping us safe. We don't listen to people in prison. We just assume law good, police good, courts good, so prison's good. But what are prisoners there for? Precisely. Explain to yourself precisely why their precise crimes require them to have every last freedom taken away from them. Hey, have you heard what's going on at Rikers right now? Prisoners are dying and being tortured. But most of us don't know. We let wardens and police tell us the truth. How every single one of those people has to be in a cage for your safety. And there are thousands of children in cages because they dared to cross a border they hadn't even been taught to believe in yet. Wonder what they would say. We don't listen to trans people because there are a million cis people out there telling us not to. Everything trans people are trying to tell us gets smothered by people saying, oh, they're liars and they have an agenda for your children. You know, exactly like they said about gay people until it became obvious they were lying. We don't listen to disabled people, even though their numbers have been swelling since COVID began, as they told us would happen. We don't listen to homeless people, because we let the nonprofit industry speak for them. And it says, don't give to the homeless, give to us instead. And of course, to be able to claim they're actually listening, some people might listen to one or two of their favorite representatives of those groups who just happen to agree with them on everything. I need someone to teach me new things and shake up my old ideas, not to reinforce myths and bigotry. But we don't listen to people affected by oppressive violence, so we think they're exaggerating or lying, for attention maybe, for money, whatever. I'll tell you what racism, ableism, homophobia, and so on really are.
I have been lectured to by heterosexual people about what homophobia is and about who is allowed to identify it. Straight people have lined up ministers, senators, barristers, journalists have lined up to tell me what homophobia is and to tell me what I am allowed to feel oppressed by. People who have never experienced homophobia in their lives, people who have never checked themselves at a pedestrian crossing, have told me that unless I am being thrown into prison or herded onto a cattle truck, then it is not homophobia, and that feels oppressive.
I'll define all these things in a way that lets me off the hook. And then I'll tell everyone that's the only correct definition. Someone who doesn't belong to marginalized groups will tell the world, you know, it's not so bad for marginalized groups, and they're bringing it on themselves, so, you know, they deserve it. They need my good ideas forced on them. Just the other day, Samuel Alito, on the US Supreme Court, justified reintroducing kidnapping children from native parents and selling them to white people by saying, before white people came, tribes were at war with each other. Lazy stereotypes based on zero knowledge of history lead to this white supremacist attitude, which is why the right wing is so keen to stop the teaching of history. They want a whole country of Alitos. My attitude began to change fundamentally when I finally began to listen. I had already read plenty, but learning to listen helped me put it all together and realize all our struggles are connected. You could say I learned to listen through social media, because it was on social media that I finally talked to people with radically different perspectives. At first it was easy to ignore them or assume they were wrong like I'd always been told. But at some point I realized it was me who was wrong. Me who wasn't listening. Me who didn't understand and would never understand until I started listening. When I started listening, I realized that up till then, all my knowledge about pretty much anything had come from white men. White men speak so confidently, regardless of how much they know. They'll argue for hours just for the sake of winning an argument. They'll debate other people's lives as if they were abstract questions of philosophy. An example of this mentality is the kill the poor sketch you might have seen. These people are trying to fix the economy, so the minister suggests,
Have you tried kill all the poor?
not necessarily doing it, just putting it into the computer just to see if it would work. Should they live or should they be killed? Let's see. I used to say everything was up for debate, but I assumed I should be part of every debate, regardless of how I was even affected by the issue. I can argue any position. I can play devil's advocate. But should I? Or should I just shut up and listen? Through listening, I also learned compassion. It's the same as how people learn compassion by reading fiction. They get the chance to see the world through someone else's eyes. I realized how much a lot of people go through, how much easier it is for me, and why I'll never fully understand, but that I can still stand by people, support them. And I also slowly learned why I had never heard or sought out their voices before. I'd been desensitized to other people's struggles because I'd been listening to the wrong people. I soon realized those guys claiming a monopoly on facts and logic had neither facts nor logic, just cruel policies for people they didn't like. They offer no solutions, just scapegoats. But they use words like science and studies and Jordan Peterson to sound like they know what they're talking about. They don't. They use your beliefs and prejudices to stir up your emotions to manipulate you. They're quite popular that way. But if you look in the right places, you can find people debunking them. And if you learn enough about the subjects they're talking about, you can debunk them yourself. You'll never truly break free of oppressive institutions if you don't first leave behind all these beliefs, the assumptions, and the cliches and so on that you've picked up along the way that hold you back. They might include elitist thinking, like thinking some people deserve freedom and respect and some people don't. They might be your belief in democracy, that other people can and should represent you. It might be your commitment to nonviolence in the face of extremely violent oppressors. These are the kind of things that have been hammered into us since birth, and it's hard to let go of entrenched beliefs. But if you need more reasons to, I've got a video on it. If you want the truth, look for it. Don't be satisfied with the easy answers from school, news, and loud but ignorant people online. Thanks.